But he's I mean, he's talking on it in a different language. So we got a little bit.
He's on the spectrum.
So you want some water?
Hey guys, we're gonna.
Okay, we're going live. Everyone's volume off in their laptops.
He's talking on it in a different language. So we got a little. Oh, that's me.
That's right.
It's me, it's not, not mine, it was off. Okay, sorry.
Okay. Great, okay, let's start with approval of the agenda, please. Any late items? Plans?
Yeah, do you need to have this? This meeting of the Joint Management Committee, I would like to start the meeting off with a land acknowledgement that we're living and working and playing and enjoying our fabulous new theater space on the Qualicum, traditional territory of the Coast Salish people.
Thank you.
Then we'll go to approval of the agenda. Any late items?
This document from.
Oh, there was this document, a supporting a document for item number 5.1. That's a job description, PDF that was submitted by email. I'll be sharing on the screen.
Yeah.
As well from Gail. Yeah. From the Performing Arts Committee Chair.
All right, well then, it's recommended, sorry.
And this is a very minor change that I would like to move within 4.1, the rental policy and rate structure implementation challenges. I'd like to actually move that to 4.2 because it feeds into that.
Yeah. Any other changes? Okay, well then, recommended that the Community Center Joint Management Committee approve the agenda as amended for the June 5th, 2025 meeting. Did I see Judy move?
Yeah.
Wait a second. Phoebe? Okay, moving on. Adoption of the minutes. Any changes?
Have you worked yet?
Yes, been a long time.
Yep. Look at them. We adopt the.
Okay, second this. Cool. All good. Everybody else, we're happy? Okay, moving right along. Public comments. Is there anybody on the line here?
No one in.
No one. And moving along to business arising from the minutes, operations debrief, Lee and Sienna.
Okay,
Reflections on 2-month occupancy dates.
so it's been a minute since we've been here. So there's also the leading up to the 2 months of occupancy that I'd also like to just quickly touch on before Sienna gets into some of the really excellent hard numbers that she's put into everything. Just to say, the move went really quite well. Huge thank you to all of our friends who came and helped us and cheered us on as we did it.
Brought chocolates.
Brought chocolates and cookies, and we're just there rah-rah-rahing, which was excellent and really helped. The BIM staff did amazingly to get into the space. It was a lot of hard work. It was long days, but there's all smiles and excitement, so it was really great. We then went into the opening shows, which was definitely a hustle, but everybody really pulled together and made it happen, and like there's no doubt that it was a huge success. So going into the other shows too.
Are there any photographs or anything? We had meetings on the island, so half of us from front council couldn't make it, so.
I'm sure
For the
if any were
shows?
taken for the shows.
The opening?
There are some on social media.
Yeah, and we have a folder of photos for the community center for like the donor events. I also have some first person
Yeah,
in
for
the gym.
the
And
ribbon
so if anybody has photos of the shows or here, please send them along.
And as Steph mentioned, we had a donor event, we had the ribbon cutting, we had a lot of things that much of the community came out to and was really exciting. There's been a lot of learning with the new space, everything from where to not put the barbecue on the courtyard and the tech in the building and the building management and the tech in the theater especially. We've already upgraded the house lighting. Thanks to Kim and Caden for helping that happen already. And yeah, it's been really great. I think the majority of the visitors have really enjoyed it. A lot of people come through just to walk through and see and are very impressed with all the spaces, with all the things that people can do here. We've already had surprises come up where we just never thought that would happen here, and they just do, which is really exciting. I'll hand over to my colleague here, Sienna, to go over some of the actual hard numbers. She's been the booking coordinator and has put a lot of work into getting some numbers together here to share with us all.
So yeah, I put together some both qualitative and quantitative, just kind of random data and stats that I thought would be interesting to share with everybody. So for the first kind of couple months that we've actually had reservations and bookings and been accepting rentals in the community center, so I took this for May and June, the upcoming month, the theater has been used for 43% of days, which means almost half of the days of these 2 months have an event in it, which is awesome. In terms of reservable rooms, including the theater as well as the flex room and this room and the meeting room and our fitness studio as well, which are all rentable. 58% of days across all those rooms have had something in them. This does include rec programs, so fitness classes, play care, kids classes, things like that, which I think is an awesome percentage of usage considering everybody's still learning how to use the space. In terms of rentals and actual unique permits created for reservations, 53 permits have been created through our booking software since we started taking bookings in mid-March, I'd say, which is, I guess, a couple months now. So that's almost a booking a day. So they've been coming in pretty quick and they don't seem to be slowing down. And then since we've opened on April 7th and then through to the end of June, out of all of the weekend days, so Fridays and Saturdays, 70% of those are being used for an event in the theater, which just shows how popular weekend days are, how popular the theater is, and that's just going to increase as we go towards the end of the year. I think almost every weekend in September, October, maybe even November are already almost full in terms of events for rentals and bookings. Hearth Presents, Toady shows, other performances and things like that. In terms of rental revenue to date, just over $7,000 has been collected in rental revenue. I don't believe that includes payments that have not been yet completed. That's shows that have already happened, deposits that have been put down, and all things like that. And then just moving a little bit away from those numbers and from the theater facts to the rest of the building, we've had over 300 people use the gym, the fitness center space since we've opened. We've been getting, and that's just people who've signed in. So we've been getting everybody to sign in at the front desk and record what time they're here and what day they're here. I do have this little graph if anybody's interested to see kind of what the popular times and days are. If we want to pass this around, anyone's welcome to take a look at them. But it's a very clear pattern of weekdays are really popular. 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. are the most popular times, which are probably as expected before and after work.
Sorry, and it's only been really running fully for a month. So it's not even since opening.
That's a good point. It wasn't even
Because we
really
didn't
open.
have.
Yeah.
And we weren't tracking any numbers until
Yes, this
April
is since I
28th.
started tracking numbers on the 29th of April, I believe. So pretty much a month, which is, yeah, probably over 10 people a day.
So is that unique, 300 unique people or?
That's not unique. Those are, a lot of them are returning patrons. So we have a membership system as well as you can pay drop in with cash or card or get tickets. We've had tons of people who I've never even seen before come use the gym, which is great because I don't know if anybody saw our small little gym in our old recreation space, but it was not very visited. So this is just awesome. And we've had some really incredible feedback in terms of the equipment that we've purchased and the kind of like vibe that we've curated in our gym. People have said that it's really unique to the island. It's completely different from the other spaces. This is feedback Jillian received from I think a couple people.
Yeah, unsolicited from users who are saying we nailed it in terms of creating an accessible space that was in collaboration and not competition with the private gyms. So that was really great to hear.
So great to hear because that was precisely our goal.
Yeah.
Exactly what we wanted. Yeah, so that's been great. The fitness studio has been super busy and full. There's people in it every single day. There's sometimes up to 5 classes a day. And then when it's not being used for a class, gym patrons use it as well. So yeah, we can easily say that that's being used for 100% of days that we are open, which is amazing. This room, as well as the meeting room, have both been used very often. This room's been used obviously more for committee meetings and council meetings, but also we've had several rentals in here for a whole variety of types of events, from obviously meetings, but also public talks and discussions. We had a corporate retreat in here the other day. Yeah, so lots of interest in this space. In the meeting room, we have meditation classes, as well as a ton of use from BIM staff for meetings. So everything's been shown and proving to be very versatile, especially the flex room. It really is living up to its name as the flex room. It switches pretty quickly and seamlessly from toddler use to an art class, to meditation workshops, to performance rehearsals, and then to a fitness class as well. So it's used for a whole variety of reasons. And I think people are really just realizing how much they can use that space for. And then the living room loads of people have been coming in and using it as a workspace or having informal meetings. Kids come and hang out there after school. I think that's one space we'd really like to see more use of in the future. Maybe just finding ways to make it more inviting, get some board games or something in there. And then I did just want to note how much Sky, the Seniors Keeping Young Society, has been using this whole building. They've had events where they've used 4 out of 5 of the rentable spaces in the building for just one event. Just on Monday, they were here for a talk. They were meant to be in this room, but over 50 people showed up, so we had to last minute switch them to the theater. And that was a really interesting moment for Jillian and Lee and I. We kind of were really quickly able to transition from here to the theater, get everybody moved over, get the tech up and running, and their talk was probably only delayed by maybe 15 minutes.
And they were thrilled.
And they were thrilled, yeah. And they have officially moved all of their future Sky Talks into the theater as well.
Wow.
Yeah, that's gonna be once a month on Monday mornings for the foreseeable future, hopefully. Yeah.
And then also, it's really important to point out that the cultural events that have happened in the theater have, as far as I can tell, I'm sure Jenny and Gail and Judy and Fraser can add more to this, but have been huge successes from what I've seen, from what I've heard from people. I not only heard from community members in regards to, in particular, the dance show, Paper Mountains, but I spoke to the lighting technician on the ferry the next day, just asked her how it went, and she said it's incredible that an island this size could be turning people away from a modern dance show. And you don't see that everywhere, and she said it really reaffirmed how theater can feel. So been here, and I assume Tony is, like, from what I've heard from the amount of people coming in and enjoying the show and the number of people, that it's been pretty big success too. I don't have words in my mouth, but I think it's a testament to the space and to the use, and it's been great. Been very affirming.
I don't think I can take any more bad news.
Well, that brings us to our next point.
Before we get into bad news, I want to thank you both in terms of, you've done a huge amount of work, been incredibly helpful. And I just got a couple of emails from some of the Sky people in terms of you're a gem, and that you've been extremely helpful in terms of explaining things and helping things and, you know, making things happen. So I think people are very, very happy with not just the space, but how we're handling it. Yeah.
Sienna.
I do have one quick question. Thank you also for your very, succinct details and for the report that you've done and all the work that you've done into it. One question, I'm just wondering, how do patrons that come into the gym pay that come after hours? How do drop-ins pay?
So we have a Dropbox where people can leave cash or a ticket, but everybody who does come during front desk hours, we're really trying to encourage them. There might not always be somebody here, so we encourage you to buy tickets or to get a monthly membership. So yeah, there is possibilities for people to pay if we're not here, which yeah, is the ticket or cash option. But obviously not everybody always has a ticket or cash. So we have had some people come in the next day and say, you guys weren't here last night, I want to pay for my gym, which is great. We are pretty much running on the honor system for when we're not here, but we are hoping to kind of stretch our front desk hours as much as we can and try to cover more hours in the future.
Just like an email is posted, the email address is posted where they can forward their payment, or there's a Dropbox.
Yeah, people can't pay via email, but there's a Dropbox. It doesn't have to be a physical payment, so cash or a ticket. But we do have an email on the front desk which just says the front desk is closed. Email us with any questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You had some bad news for us?
Not so much bad news, but it actually more moves into probably the next.
Except for, I think we wanted to make sure this is the time for other people to contribute to this conversation about reuse as well, and because everybody, we've all been using it, right, everybody here, so things that you've experienced and know that.
Got some comments from the actors, and I've been tracking down what Sherry's done in terms of outfitting the green room and everything, and I wanted to ask you about the tables. Because their suggestion was to get half-size tables, so that in fact, when they were putting on the makeup, they could get closer.
Right.
And we want to do some fundraising in terms of getting the lights specifically, so that there's, you know,
Yeah.
surround lights and stuff like that, so, and that, we've got an AGM coming up for Tony, and that's one of the things that we'd like to spend some money on, so if we can contribute specifically to that. But I want to talk to you in terms of whether we can trade out the tables or do something else and figure that out, so.
Currently, the tables that are in there are just these, essentially these tables from our other meeting room that we move in and out as needed for the shows. Because they are our most shallow, otherwise they're the deeper banquet tables. I think Sherry did do some research or make some planning on having a counter in there that would be permanent but folded down. It probably would have to be custom built for the space.
So we've got these portable mirror lights that we got from the film industry that are really relatively quite cheap. They store away very nicely, which might be something to look at.
Yeah, that's possible. I feel like in there it could be even a little bit more permanent too.
Oh.
Yeah, the use of that space is very specific. We don't use it for anything other, so so it could be. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity in those spaces.
It's really hard to do the hearing equipment as well. So somebody came in the middle of the show and hadn't downloaded the app and hadn't figured anything out yet. It was just sort of like, whoa, 15 minutes ahead of the show, maybe I can handle it, but you know, I had absolutely no idea where to start.
Oh, okay. Sure. We can
The
go with that.
instructions that are on that sheet are a little bit hard to follow.
Okay,
We should work on that a bit.
absolutely, yeah, that's good to know, thank you.
I'll add a few things too from running Dancing at Loomis. So we're halfway through, it's been fantastic. We've had one sellout. And this weekend should be pretty busy as well too. Things have gone relatively smoothly. A couple little hiccups here and there with like sound and lights, but overall pretty good. Huge thank you to you, Lee, for sorting out that sound issue on our nights. But that was great. Yeah, really not many few pieces of critical feedback to give as to what could be done different, other than perhaps if we can get Caden back at some point for training for a number of us, so that we've got a nice big bank of people to help out for, the piano show on the weekend and all of that sort of stuff. So
Yeah, that's one of the challenges we're gonna
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I talked to Caden, he's like, yeah, I need 4 more days of 6 hours per day kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And it's something we could contribute in, as well too, but it's
I'm in preschool and he's a PhD. I do more than 4 hours.
yeah, exactly. 4 times 6.
Yeah, even more. That's very complicated light panel compared to what we've had.
Maybe I could speak on this sponsored seat program that we've been kind of managing. I don't know the exact number, but we've got several pledges for seats. So there'll be a nice check coming in that will be used for specific sort of audiovisual equipment for the theater. So it's worked out quite well. And we still have till the end of June, so we still have a couple of performances to really sell those seats.
Yeah. That's the other thing, in terms of the seats that have the names on them, that presented a bit of a problem in terms of people coming in and wanting to sit in their seat. Right? And it's like, we don't have a reservation system, it's not, you know, and it's like, the first night when we opened, there was a real scramble in terms of, you know, I couldn't get it. People were rushing so that they could get the seat that they wanted. And I couldn't take the time to check names off the list that I had, and it's like, go ahead, just, you know, scramble, and I just, you know.
We went
It
on
was a sold out, it was a sold out house, so it's like, you know, if there's people here that are, that's when we'll have a problem, but it's quite, that whole thing in terms of figuring out how to reserve, whether you can put a code across, you know, somebody else came in and put codes across 6 seats and a bunch in terms of just wanting, you know, a group of friends to sit together, and it's like, oh, but, you know, it's like little tiny organizational things that how to handle crowds.
I mean, they are all numbered, so you could do assigned seating if you really wanted to.
It's a big leap to go from festival seating to assigned seating.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So you need one ticketing system.
Yeah.
Run centrally
Yeah.
by a person. I mean, I'm happy when the time comes to talk about, because we've done a lot of research into the different systems that are out there. At some point though, it'll be, as we talked about, something that probably the Hearth would probably end up managing, like a ticketing system for the venue.
Yeah. And I just imagine other problems in terms of you're in my seat, right? And all of like, you know, boarding an airplane. You know,
I think that is one of the points that it's important that we emphasize with all potential seat donors, and it's, you know, reminding them it's not their seats.
Yeah, I saw a hand up.
Yeah, I think I'll talk about it when I'm talking about the job description, but yeah, it's related to getting a ticketing system.
I can mention that we are, and maybe we'll reach out to you, Kim, but we've already talked to several other theaters
Right.
on what ticket system they use. So we'll be researching those this coming month or so.
Okay,
So that we're ready in September with a proper ticketing
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
platform.
the Wild West right now, because the platforms have become really quite inexpensive. So there's many, many ones out there.
Yeah.
And some of them, it's really finding the right one that's the right fit for what the operation of this space is.
Well, plus, we'd like to add more to it if we can, like accepting donations and memberships.
Yeah.
If we could have one platform that does it all.
Yeah.
For a nonprofit.
Yeah.
You know, that would be the best.
Right, and I think there's one, because I would say that you're gonna get a lot of people who maybe want to borrow the system and plug into it, which is something to look at. For example, a third party wants to use the theater, they want to use the reservation system, but they're going to want to sell their own tickets. So there are systems that you can use that allow you to plug into something like brown paper tickets, or allow you to plug into Eventbrite, which is something we found useful. So yeah, when it's, yeah, it is. It's the Wild West. There's so many different versions of options out there.
I'm curious, brown paper tickets, because that one comes up a lot.
Yep.
It's a US company. Do
Yeah.
people have thoughts about how we feel about that? That we should, I mean, because I think we should probably stick with a Canadian company, but,
I wouldn't use brown paper tickets for running this venue,
okay,
but it's something that people who like Eventbrite or brown paper tickets, it's people who don't have venues, who want to do one-time or two-time only ticket sales. The tricky part is, how do you, and brown paper tickets does not do assigned seating. They only do festival seating,
okay.
right? So same thing with Eventbrite. Eventbrite will not do like assigned seating. So there are more complicated systems that do assigned seating. So you have to build a map, you have to identify where they are, and it has to be maintained on a regular basis. So what you were looking for is a system that you can, that smaller groups can plug into and sell tickets through your system, right? And it can go back and forth from festival to assigned seating. So anyway, we're going into the weeds a bit here. Happy to help make some of those decisions.
But further to your point, yeah, like, so we looked into some Canadian ticketing systems before Run Dancing in Lunasan. We ran out of time and we had to stick with our account. It involved a lot of setup that we just weren't quite yet ready for. So yeah, there are options out there, but they're few and far between. For like a Canadian version of it,
Yeah,
right?
no, I understand.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, we okay to move on to 4.2? Let's do it.
Actually, it's doesn't say Sienna on here, but it is Sienna who's gonna talk about it first, about some of the challenges that we've been encountering. She's really been encountering with our policy and how to implement that.
Yeah, so I have a few different topics. I wonder if we want to kind of go through one and then chat about it and then move on to the next one. The first problem that I'll bring up, first challenge that I've encountered that is kind of the first step when somebody comes to make a booking is in order to give people, in order for people to reserve a date, they need to put a deposit down. And with our current fee structure, how we have performance rentals and rehearsal rentals and non-performance rentals and different event types, all with different rates. In order to give people an accurate quote for their booking, they need to know how many performance hours they'll have, how many rehearsal hours they'll have, which presents a huge challenge if people are coming in a year or two in advance saying, I'd like to book November 2026. And I'm like, great, I can give you a quote if you know how many hours you need to be rehearsing and performing for. But of course, nobody knows that far in advance. So that has been a bit of a struggle, just in determining what the ending fee will be and figuring out what people are putting a deposit on. The way that I've been doing it now is for people to reserve a date in advance. We'll essentially just suggest that they reserve the entire day. So they'll be charged the daily rate, like the daily base rate for the space that they're booking, and then they'll pay the deposit on top of that. But yeah, I do think maybe a better system might be needed in terms of having a bit more diversity in fees. And like, I think that having something potentially like we're booking an entire day and we will have one performance and it's this flat fee. Or maybe we're booking an entire day and we have two performances and it's this flat fee. I think that might eliminate some of that admin and figuring out hours and things like that. Yeah, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that challenge.
A bit, it's like, it's good that you know far in advance, because it's the front entrance when you first meet with them and talk to them, that the information is got. And if if you're not making those decisions right then, right? I know it's very difficult for people who haven't figured it out yet, but what happens is if you don't, then there's a gap and then they arrive and then they want extra space, they want stuff and they haven't booked it. So it depends on how many times you're going to revisit them, right? So if you're going to visit them, like if they've done a hold on it and they do a base deposit, then what we do is if we revisit that before it's absolutely secure, right? Because they just put a hold on it with a minimum deposit. So that's one way of getting past, trying to figure out what all the costs are going to be up front, but they've got their hold on it. You can shift it and just say that this is going to be a blank, like a fundamental deposit that you're going to pay, as long as they know that they're going to have to come back and confirm in the details that extra use of the space. Because what we run into is someone puts a hold on it, like 8-10 months in advance, and then we used to give them the benefit of the doubt, but we would just assume they were going to use it. And then they come back with wanting it half the time, and then it's too late to rent it out. So we get lost revenue. Or we get the opposite, where they come in, and in order to make their event work, they need all this other space and all this other time, and we don't have it, so they cancel. So we've had to figure out, like, how do you ensure, like, you revisit closer to the time, because we're busy, right? And so you don't think about contacting that person and reminding them that they have to confirm what exact use they're going to have. So that's a challenge.
Could that be in addition to the contract that 3 months prior to the event that they reconfigure with you in terms of letting you know how many rehearsal hours, and at that point, 3 months prior, they would have an idea.
Yeah, for sure. And I have been quite hands-on with all of the permits. I have my little binder and I have everything printed out. So I've been trying really hard to really stay on top of that and revisiting probably way too many times with the renters, making sure we do have everything. Here's one of them, making sure we do have everything confirmed. So it's been working okay in terms of actually getting the numbers down closer to the event. I think just having a more specifically determined policy or procedure that says this is the deposit, and if you're holding a day this many days in advance, or super far in advance, then you pay exactly this amount. Because right now it is kind of just a percentage of the daily hold, which is something I kind of just made up.
Right. And I think you're right. I think we moved to actually having a set amount for the initial deposit, which is like a placeholder, right?
Yeah.
It didn't really matter. We haven't worked out the details, but you paid X amount of money down.
Half the day.
And then half the day it's held, and it's held for what the minimum was or what you put forward at that time. I don't know if that helped with, but it seems like a good thing to change the policy, because then it makes it a lot easier at that first meeting. They just plunk their deposit down, they've got the hold on the day. Because what the activity is less important than the fact that the room's not gonna be available, right? So whether it's a rehearsal or a performance isn't a big deal in advance, because it just means that nothing else can happen in that space. So they'll end up paying more if it's a performance, less if it's a rehearsal.
Exactly, yeah. The only challenge with that is when a commercial renter is booking the space, their full payment is required 90 days prior to the event. And their full payment will include how many performance hours they'll have, which 3 months is a decent amount of time, I think, especially for local companies, to know exactly maybe how many performances or how many hours they'll need for those performances. I think that's another little problem is when it's a commercial renter.
Do you have a policy in there that if someone, because this can happen too, they come in and then they change their mind in the last minute or the day before, they're going to add in stuff, that they can be billed afterwards, or is there a penalty for that? Or not really?
We added stuff and we got billed, and it was great, because we realized, for example, we need more tech time, we need more setup time. It's the growing pains of moving into a new space. So we were lucky that there was nobody else during those times. And hopefully the lessons we learned this time are gonna apply for us in October and next year and so on and so forth. But those new groups from, say, for example, off island, they aren't gonna have that information.
No, but that's commercial use.
Yeah.
And so it's just growing pains. You can't make them do that. It's just you need to have your policies clear so they can know what they're interfacing.
It isn't written specifically in the policy about changes. There's a cancellation procedure, but nothing in terms of changes.
Yeah, and I think that would be good to add into the policy that changes can be made subject to the availability of the space. So people understand that, right? Like that encourages people to book earlier. We run into this a lot with commercial people we don't regularly do business with. And it's incredibly time consuming for you to have to constantly be working with them and updating it and then trying to figure out what the bill is and then having them complain about the bill and not knowing what it was.
Yeah.
Just a few things. One of them is, I think that we did talk about the priority of local versus commercial coming in off the island in that 3 month, that they have to book it up 3 months. We did talk about having the booking coordinator call another group that might be conflicting with time.
Yeah, that is exactly what I've been doing. So if I think this happened actually with Fraser as well. He's a great example for everything, really. But somebody was looking to come into the theater, I believe the day after or maybe the day before one of your performances. And so I did call or email Fraser and I was like, somebody's wanting to book the theater for this day. Are you okay with that? Do you guys think you'll be out by then? Just checking when there's something happening right on either end of a booking, which is the benefit also of being a small community and being a relatively small scale rental space, that I am able to call and check in with people. And I have been telling groups that as well, especially local theater groups on the Hearth, that if somebody is interested in a day that is right beside yours or maybe another day you've expressed interest in, I will just try my best to check with everyone.
That was a piano show. It worked out brilliantly.
Yeah.
We got in early. We were an hour and a half to get everything out and then mopped up and ready to go. And
Yeah. My other, I guess, comment is, we don't wanna burn out your hours.
Yeah.
So we have to be very efficient with our going back and forth and being so helpful but that, I know that's, your character and that's a great thing. It's great service, but there has to be some,
Just
some management of your time. Also, I'm a little confused because are you the booking coordinator? I thought that there wasn't a role for a booking coordinator. I just need clarification on that
Yeah.
because it sounds like you are.
Well, here's the reality, right, is that we cannot function without a booking coordinator. So while we were not approved for additional recreation staff, it's not something that we could leave empty. So what's happening is that we've not been able to backfill, and so we're scrambling in other areas, essentially.
So, but it's working for you?
Not really.
So what does that mean?
Sorry.
Does that mean that you've been able to rebudget so that you can pay someone to do
No.
the position?
No, it's within our existing recreation budget, within the existing staff complement, adding this workload plus the other elements of the
So
facility.
that'll go up. I mean, you
It's
guys-
not long-term sustainable, no.
Good, I just, that's my concern, is that it's not sustainable and it needs to be, the white elephant in the room needs to be talked about. Because for you, for rec, for BIM, you can't do it. We're stretched, totally, yeah, so, I mean, I recognize that, so, I hope that others help with that.
Just want to go back, do you need a policy adjustment done right now at this meeting for this, like just in terms of the deposit?
There's an awful lot to go through. I don't know if that's whether or not we need like a
So this is just for information purposes and we should think about it and then.
I think there's several policy changes that would be really great, for making there to be less admin work and easier for everybody, myself and the renter. I think there's a decent amount of them, but I don't think there's probably time to figure it out.
Maybe good with a workshop where we would go over
Yeah.
something.
And I think we can do that in a smaller group if
Yeah, okay.
anybody wants, it doesn't need to be the initial policy subgroup.
Yeah.
If anybody, maybe we do that as part of this meeting, identify, like talk about some of this and the challenges and
Gotcha.
then we group up
Got
and
Break something.
propose some revisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it's more just going over these.
Yeah,
Going over the
Yeah.
issues.
that makes sense.
Ask questions if we need to, but
Perfect.
To list the issues.
yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Sure. We all knew that we were gonna do it.
Yeah.
Open it and then see what we needed to fix, right? So this is just that.
Yeah,
Do we want to set a time up?
sure.
Except for not, we can gone through everything.
Yeah.
We'll know what all the issues are that we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Because we may be discussing the booking coordinator as well.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So
Yeah, so that first thing, the deposits, that's a big one. And then the second one that I had written down was that people are looking for loopholes in the policy. So people are coming in and looking to find ways that they are able to, I understand that everybody wants to do it as affordable as they can, but we've had inquiries come in asking to be qualified as community groups rather than commercial groups. So I think just a little bit more clarity and a little bit more definition in the group types is needed. One in particular that I've encountered several times is that there isn't really a category for an individual on the island who's a local community member who maybe isn't running an event for their business, but they're also not a group because it's just one person. So I think having a category for an individual would be really important and just really a bit more strictly defining those group qualifications. What counts as a community group? That's obviously the cheapest rate that people are able to use for the theater or for any space. And what specifically qualifies as commercial, and then having an individual person. A couple examples that I thought of in terms of having an individual come in would be, what if somebody wants to come in and host a movie night? They've got a cool movie they want to show to the community. They just are doing it for fun. What do we charge them? A local musician, it might not be their business, but they just love playing music. They want to put on a show. They're not a community group. They're also not a commercial renter. It's mostly individuals that really this thing does come up with. So I think,
on the film thing, if somebody rents this venue, puts on a movie out there, sells tickets for it, this venue is liable for the cost if they don't have a proper license.
100%. Yeah, it's in the policy to have a license.
Very, very clear that they have to have a license to show up.
Yes.
Just ran into that. It's significant.
Thank you, yeah.
Yeah, and that brings me also into clearer categorization needed specifically for the event types. And this is specifically for the theater. Everything else is a room rental, but the theater does have a non-performance rental, a rehearsal rental, and a performance rental. So having, I guess, a definition on exactly what those mean, we've come up with a pretty good idea of what they are just internally, so we can categorize people pretty well. A movie performer or a movie presentation, though, is something that we've ran into issues with. Like, it's not really a performance. They're not using all this crazy tech and lighting and audio and sets and whatnot. But there's an audience, so it is technically a presentation, a performance. So movies are a big one, as well as like a talk or a presentation or a lecture. It's kind of the same as a movie. So what does that get categorized into? And then finally on that topic is the definition between a non-performance and a rehearsal rental. So we've been using non-performance rentals essentially to charge people, even theater groups that are coming in, to just set up or bring tech in or just kind of do a preliminary, it's not a rehearsal, it's not a performance, but it's just essentially a setup. We think though that maybe that category might have been created with the intention of it being a completely unrelated theater event, like a fitness class or a social event or something like that. So I think really defining non-performance rental versus rehearsal rental, and if groups are coming in to do a performance, are they able to even use the non-performance category?
But when we were creating that, it was based on what the use of the space and the cost would be. So performance meant public were coming in. And so there would be any extra costs because the public would be coming in and making the place dirty. Or whether they were charging tickets, price for tickets or not. Tech meant that there was a technician. And non-performance meant that there was nothing being touched. So I think if we just go back and look at what the actual use of the cost is, to help with those, clarify those categories, people will understand it better. Because then we don't need ones that are, have different labels, but it's exactly the same financial impact. And that would be a good elimination.
Cool.
The thing about the private, an individual, when we were first coming up with this, I'm trying to remember which theater we used that had like 4 categories. It was Port. It was
Moody?
Port Moody, thank you.
It was the Port Moody one.
I thought that was the inspiration that we used in terms of our thinking, where we talked about a local, a group that was a nonprofit but didn't actually have to be nonprofit in terms of being registered. And that art groups had the exact same listing as nonprofit/community groups. And it's interesting because it did get brought up that like Laurel Bailey wanted to put a show on the stage, but she's an individual. But my understanding from the Port Moody breakdown was that she would live that, because it was a theater production, art, practice in the theater, presentation, or community group would be under the same price structure. That was my understanding of what we agreed to when we were setting that. It doesn't matter if we don't, but I'm just saying, if we go to the Inlet Theater and how we use that as an inspiration, it laid it out kind of concretely. And we can go back and say, do we agree with this or do we not agree with this for ourselves?
Right.
It's almost like we can kind of just have price structure A, price structure B, price structure C, and what would that person or that group or that entity fall into. So maybe we just need to broaden what is defined in that kind of lowest price structure.
The policy does specifically say group.
Right, so what I think it's a little bit too literal and we need to just broaden it a little bit. And conceptually, we want this person who's from our community and pays taxes here and helps support this place to get that community rate, so they would fall to that.
And the easy way around it is you have groups that are registered charities and organized. Then you also have what's called an ad hoc group. An ad hoc group is just me and Fraser, my friend. And I think that's what we do, is if you allow ad hoc groups into that category, then you have individuals, right? Because they just have to say, I'm going to be the front person, could put my Visa card down, pay for it, and my friends are gonna come in and do this. They're still within that group category, they're just ad hoc. So they're coming together for this one event. They're not a registered charity, they're not an entity, anything other than that. And that can be a way to, I think it's worth to rejig the policy and do what you're saying, is keep the structure the same and make sure we've got the clarity on the umbrella. So good for the meeting.
Might be another category too, there was that,
It's the private individual category, but that is specifically for an event not open to the public. So that's something that I'd suggest looking at too, is potentially adjusting, it's that middle category. So it's about 1.5 times the rate of a community group rate, but not nearly as expensive as the commercial rate. So that's a suggestion I would have, is potentially adjusting that category to include private events, private renters, as well as individual renters that have a public event.
Yeah.
Because I do think, I mean, I wasn't a part of the policy or fee structure development, but I do think having that highly discounted rate for community groups such as the Hearth and Theatre on the Isle, and these groups that do this almost like a full-time job for some, it's nice to have that really discounted rate and being able to offer them that. So I obviously want to offer a good and fair price to individuals as well, but I don't know if we want to lump them in with community groups.
I think when we're thinking about this, we also need to think of that, there was that situation that was a friend of a friend who had a show that had heard about the theatre opening and was thinking of maybe bringing it here. And it's like, you know, we basically said we haven't figured out the policy yet, but in terms of what the fees would be, but it seems to me that's another one.
Right, and I think there's thinking behind it, just to remind us that when it comes to performances in that venue, we don't want to create a situation where the primary users that are using it are competing against other people that the municipality has let in. The idea behind the policy was to drive some of that traffic through the Hearth, like through that, so that those add-on services would be there. So if somebody was looking to put on a show, they could come through the Hearth to get that rate, or come through Tony to get that rate.
That's something that I wanted to bring up as well, is that if we are charging individuals or groups that or people that aren't specifically groups, a higher rate, and we do maybe encourage them to go through the Hearth as they are a community group, that might put an incredible amount of work and strain on the Hearth. Like, I know you guys already are managing a ton of shows and have done such an amazing job so far, but if everybody who is an individual person potentially gets charged a higher rate and says, oh, if I go through the Hearth, I'll get a cheaper rate, everyone's gonna flood to the Hearth, which would be a ton of, I mean, the reality is the Hearth probably could manage 3 different shows a week every weekend.
Are you talking, these are when you say shows, they're performances that are happening in the space?
Yeah, like if an individual were to come and want to put on a performance or a movie or whatever it is, and we say, you know, this is your rate as an individual or a commercial renter, and they say, why aren't I a community group? And we say, well, you're not a group and you're not a little community group. And the island will know, if they don't already know, that the Hearth does count as one of these community groups. So they might just go to them and say, hey, will you present this show for me so that I pay half price?
And I think the key, we can drill down this in a separate meeting and figure out what the policies are. The key is also around the expectations, because from what I understand, if they go through Muni, it's just like, we're just gonna open the space, you're responsible for everything, right? And therefore, that type of user group, it's appropriate that they would just interface with the community, with them, and just do that activity on it, right? But if for people who are looking for some more add-ons or wanting more, like more technical support, more other support, then that puts the pressure on, like, that's where the line is. When we were creating this policy, we were trying to clarify that in that area about who would come up to do that. And then why the subsidy was there for one group and not another group. So it's good for us to go back and re-examine that now that we've got some real concrete examples. and because it does tie into a booking coordinator, Jillian, like the traffic that's being generated. Like where does it go to and how is it being organized? And which organization is best equipped to handle what type of, work that's being generated? So that's like a nice bigger discussion.
I just want to point out too, Sienna, we don't want you bouncing them to us and then we bouncing them to you. You know, that would be really unfortunate.
Yeah.
So, and it might happen, and I really hope that we can sort that out.
In the interest of time, to keep to the schedule we've got here, Sienna, is there anything else from 4.2?
The only like really quick last little thing was just a problem that's been presenting, like I think Leah and I have both noticed this, that not having any event staff on site, not having really any staff on site during events is a problem, because it just probably over doubles the workload that Leah and I will have to do before an event. We'll have to have all these, pre-event tech run-throughs and orientations and a whole bunch of meetings and kind of consulting with the group that's coming in just to make sure that they are fully ready and fully self-sufficient in this building. Like you said, we're essentially saying, here's the room,
Right.
do what you will with it. So yeah, I think just having no events staff in the building at all, and when events are happening, it increases the workload of us, I think, a decent amount.
And after hours.
Yeah.
Calling Lee in on the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
want that to happen.
actually a little dangerous.
Yeah.
So what would be your bare minimum recommendation for staff needed during that time?
I didn't think of that. I think we've been talking about having potentially a volunteer program. I think maybe you potentially involved in setting that up. It hasn't really been started yet. We've just been chatting about how great a volunteer program would be, just to have more like not event staff but event liaisons, so people are there to help point people in the right direction, and maybe they know how to turn the projector on in the theater, like little things like that, which would just make everybody feel more confident that there's somebody who knows what they're doing to an extent in the building, and that work also doesn't land on the custodian who is doing other tasks. So I don't know, that's just a lot.
So maybe if I could make a suggestion, then that we now pick up a time and a date where we could have a little sub-meeting and go through this sort of stuff. So we can move on to 4.3. Are we wanting to do this relatively quickly, relatively soon, before more and more bookings happen?
I mean, that's a good question. When would you like this policy to be in place?
As soon as possible, I'd say, because I do have a few bookings that are, tentatively in there. I've held the date for them, but I'm not 100% sure what category they qualify for, or what event they're gonna come in as.
Is this something that, needs to go to council?
That was my question. So I'm not sure. So if it does, then we need to do it before the council break for summer, which would be helpful.
Does that mean every little policy tweak like this has to go through council?
It's a bylaw.
No, it's a policy,
It's a
but we do
policy.
have in the policy, the review date is July 2025. In practice, these are, just don't forget to review annually, it's not,
Right.
but that is in the policy.
A quick question, if we have the meeting to get it sorted out, and you know where it's going to, you don't need council approval to start just.
Exactly, because they're not major changes, and obviously we wouldn't be implementing new rates or anything without any kind of approval, but just, I guess, the distinction and more, qualification of categories and things, that would just help me a lot in terms of giving people really clear answers and charging people the right rates so there aren't changes further down the road. That can definitely be just a conversation, and I can implement it right away without any policy changes.
Gotcha. Next week,
Yes, I'm going on this very.
I'm able to meet next week. If you want me to sit up.
Is this something that you have time during the day, your work day?
I don't think this falls on Sienna's workload, actually. I think
Okay.
she's here presenting to the committee about all this, but this is committee work.
But you,
I do really appreciate that, but I also do think I would like to be.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to negate what you're saying, but it seems like her feedback is so valuable that I would like, if there's any way that we could have her when we're rewording the policy, I think that her feedback is really very valuable.
She's very Mark, that's why she did all sorts of things.
At the end of the day, it's gonna make your job easier.
Yes,
Right.
Julie is very much trying to protect my
I
time
know.
right now, which I so appreciate.
Maybe we should figure out, Jillian, who needs to be in there, and then we'll figure out when it can happen.
I definitely think Lee and Sienna have to be there.
Does anybody want
I
to
wonder-
do that?
It's like maybe.
Yeah,
I'm happy to be there as well.
well, I think your perspective as a user is helpful in that as well.
Yeah.
I think that might be a really great start if we want to do that. Maybe, okay. But I don't think everybody has to.
Yeah.
I think we probably get further if we,
So I have Lee, Sienna, Fraser, and Mimi, is that correct?
yeah, and is it me too? Do you want me there too?
Do you want someone from the Hearth, or do you need to be there, since this is, like, what's the scope of this discussion? Is it gonna be about the booking coordinator? And an overlap?
No.
Not?
No, this is about policy.
We have to bring it back to this committee anyway before we can.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's good, sure.
Okay, so
Unless, sorry, I don't mean to speak for you.
No, I mean, I do think just clarify, the only thing that you know, just taking Jamie's suggestion of, we don't want it to bounce from you to us and back. So when you're thinking about it, you'd want to think, oh, we don't want to say no to an art project that's going to be in the theater because they're not a community group, but they could be an ad hoc community group, so that that's not their reason for coming to us, because we can't accept every show that comes to us. There's not enough time in a day for every show that we're already getting. But I just want to say, ask a question about if you're going to council or not going to council. If we're defining terms more clearly, is that a policy change?
I feel like it is.
Okay,
I also feel like council would be happy to learn of all these developments. Council.
Yep.
But it's not like a bylaw, we have to have an amendment bylaw, this policy was updated on
Change rates.
next day.
Well, maybe back to what we need to do is, in interest of time here, maybe the four of us then, outside of this meeting, organize a time that works for everybody. Sure. Sound good?
This does not address what Sienna brought up secondarily regarding the positions that might need to be available for the rentals. Is this a separate discussion?
That's
Yeah, that has to be separate, because that needs to be in relationship to what Hearth is thinking about doing.
Okay, so how do we
That's a
address?
larger- That's a larger, much larger discussion.
Okay, so when do we return to that?
It might be part of the 5.1 production programming coordinator as well. So we haven't got that.
Are we okay to move on to 4.3?
Just want to recommend that we can really address that one, the last thing she brought up. Thank you.
Theater equipment.
This is more just about some clarity around the space and particularly the theater, and just, you know, we have amazing donations being offered. We have this amazing piano that apparently did an incredible job on the weekend. And just like, there's no clarity for me, and there was all the donations that came in, the AV stuff, like the sound equipment and things like that are being installed in there. I'm not unclear on, so like, who owns them, who is allowed to use them, and who is replacing them when they break, who is responsible for making sure they all go back, and that sort of thing. Because, you know, currently, I don't know if somebody from the outside could come and use the piano, or which microphone stand is allowed to go out, or
Is there a fee for piano use?
is there a fee? Yeah, exactly. And then if there is a fee, like, it's a Hearth asset, I believe. And how does that work? Because, yeah, I'm unclear on it. And I don't think we ever nailed anything down.
I can speak a little bit about the piano, and I can say we don't know. But I can tell you that the board is working on it.
Oh,
The board, we are talking about it.
sorry.
Just in the usage, if there's rent, who's paying the insurance, who can use it, who's got the key, all those questions are being asked at the board level.
Right.
And so right now I can't say, but we should be able to tell you who can use it, if someone can use it, is there a rental cost? You know, all those questions.
And then,
That's the piano.
right, and then similarly, like the sound equipment that was donated, I believe donated, this was, and then also the money coming from the chair donations and things like that. Just some clarity, I guess, is, I'm unclear on some
Super
of the
complicated to separate it out. It's really difficult
Yeah,
to have some gear that's owned by the municipality and some gear that's not owned by the municipality that you need other permission to use for. It's like the way it works best is when all of the gear is inventoried and run and taken care of by one person who makes sure that the equipment is well kept and properly cared for, which is usually your house technician, which we don't have, right? So in lieu of having a position of somebody to take care of all of that, you're right, there needs to be a policy developed for whether it's jointly owned, so that whoever's purchased the equipment or arranged for it to come in is covered by one umbrella who protects that equipment and also identifies when it's aged out or when it's broken, needs to be repaired. Would that help?
yeah, and then also similarly, like who decides what donated equipment we take? Right,
Yeah,
there's always gonna be somebody saying, hey, I've got this really awesome
okay.
turntable, I don't know, something that like, it may be very niche, maybe very awesome, it could be like incredible donation, but where does it go? Who's allowed to use it, and who decides on what we take and what we need, and because like
Space is
it all,
so tight.
yeah, space is so tight, it all impacts like other operations, not just theater operations, right? Like we had something already this week, right? And you know,
Is, one thing is, would be a concern is if the park had applied for a grant, and received equipment. It's a little tricky if the grant says it's ours,
100%.
you know, and
Yeah.
and there might be a time frame before we can donate it.
Mhm.
And
But then,
that's-
so
that's
if Toady gets a grant for amazing theater lights, are we letting, like, are they also able to bring them and they belong to Toady? And then where do we make those?
Well, the issue, I think, if you don't focus on the equipment itself, that's actually not the issue. Because you can have equipment owned by different people and different things around it, like I could lend you my special doohickey big thing that you need. The real issue is who's controlling the equipment and making sure it's being used properly and is also responsible so that you're covering equipment that comes from different places, right? So that's actually, because we have that, we have equipment that belongs to us, but we borrow equipment from another theater for a period of time. We also rent stuff, we do all kinds of stuff, right? So I see what the challenge that you've got is you don't have somebody who there's no policy around that. And in lieu of actually having the person, maybe we can develop a policy and then maybe look at like a contract, like a small contract position for someone just to oversee that. Because I can see that this becoming a significant issue for him.
So I'm gonna go staff and then to council.
To Jillian, we do have the acquisition of appendices of the public art policy that might be helpful. It doesn't speak to storage concerns, but I feel like what's happening is that we don't want an individual staff member being the one who has to make these decisions. And
Yeah, it's more about the decisions.
it's a decision.
Yeah.
So in that policy, we did have the public art committee making decisions. And then I think that when it was originally developed, the idea was like, we want things and we want to have them. And then suddenly presented with something that we don't necessarily want. Now the public art committee didn't really want to be saying no. So it's very careful to see who would be, I mean, it comes to mind this group, but maybe a group would be sort of adjudicating.
Steph, are you saying that you think the public art advisory committee should own and manage the audiovisual?
No, I was saying that policy can be used as a reference for this. Okay, but so in building on Kim's assertion that a policy should be developed and but not having one contract person being a decider, having a group decide. And a set of criteria around what you're making those decisions based on.
And Gail, didn't you look at setting up a committee, starting a committee for the technical aspects of the theater?
Yeah, so there is a committee that's formed, John Siddle, Ryan Hochschild, Doug Wood, and I don't know, Peyton could join it, they're just starting it up with the, encouraging them again last night and yeah, 2 days ago. And yes, they're starting to work out some thinking, but without a technical director,
Yeah.
we keep coming back to the same question is who manages the inventory? And it's the same question you're asking. And I mean, I think it dovetails right back to what Sienna's question is, which is who's on staff? Who's here between 6 and 9 PM, right? Is it volunteers that are gonna manage the inventory? Okay, fine. But in terms of your question about everything that we've donated, the Hearth has donated to this point, I think the decision was that anything that we donate becomes part of your inventory and ownership, except the piano, and that would have its own print, only because it's like $100,000 asset. But other than that, we didn't want to nickel and dime that, and that way it could be insured collectively under your inventory.
And maintained and replaced.
Sorry, Judy. Councilor Getty.
Can't remember, go ahead.
Can I make a quick pitch? Okay,
Have you got a wish list? Has anybody got a wish list in terms of, okay, so it seems to me those are the parameters.
Right.
That, if somebody wants to donate, then this is the kinds of stuff that we're looking for.
So maybe you make a quick pitch, which is to take Steph's idea and form a committee that's specifically for the technical equipment for the theater, to create a policy to go around what it, how that would work. But then we also look at figuring out if we could squeeze some dough to get a contract, not a large contract, as a technical director, overseer, to help implement that policy. So in other words, it's not like all the time, but from time to time, it's just to review, so you could say, Lee, I've got this, and this. We don't have to have the whole committee meet in order to discuss it, but you could have a contracted professional technical director who knows the venue really well and could easily make those decisions and also identify issues. Say this is gonna get broken, or no, help in that area. So is that a way forward? So there would be a committee that would meet, that would set the policy. We'd look at trying to figure out how to come up with a short-term contract, a light contract, maybe 4 or 5 times a year for someone just to oversee and look at it. Is that a way forward?
Exactly, I'm not sure where that would be squeezed from, if then you
Well,
squeeze it out, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a user fee, we could, we would look at it, right? Because what it is if we would develop a policy to access this equipment, you would pay this extra fee, that fee would go to be paying the technical director to keep an eye on it. I mean, we can figure it out, but I think it's something that needs to happen pretty darn quick. Because we're at the beginning of it, and I could see starting in the fall, it could become a more significant issue. If everything goes well until something breaks, one of those lights are $3,000 US.
Okay, so we've got, somehow or other, we figured out that we can hire Kate for X number of hours, and there's a limit to it, and then we figure out that there's somebody like Kate that maybe can deal with, asset management. And we figure out what that is gonna cost us, if the person exists, and
Definitely people will do that.
what that's gonna cost us.
Yeah.
And it's-
I think
and
the
then
key-
we've got the real tough stuff in terms of where's the money gonna come from, right? But we have to know what we're looking for.
Right, my question for you, Lee, is, and Sienna, is how would it work for you guys? What do you need? You can't have somebody on site because we can't afford them. What's the next best thing? What's the next best model?
Maybe you don't even answer for this right now.
It's got
Don't know.
really fancy custodians.
Yeah, and it's not just, it's like sports equipment too, right?
Yeah.
It could be a lot of
Recreation
things,
stuff.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
it's especially about donations, facility-related donations,
Yeah.
Gail, you had a question as well?
Oh, just wanted to say that, adding to the names that Judy mentioned, Caden, and we could also add John Siddle possibly to that as a possible person who would be contracted for that inventorying one, a couple of times a
You
year.
have the knowledge on lighting.
No, I meant to.
Yeah, no, anyway, just like, I think it's a committee. Committee is the policy. I guess, like, we could figure out the committee thing, but it's.
Yeah,
So
I
sorry,
think-
just a comment from staff here, let's keep comments on individual names and stuff out, because if they're not here, they're included in this, let's just do that.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you for that. Maybe,
Just one suggestion that I could think of is that if there were a trained technician, a house technician, that if there were groups that were wanting to use, for example, the projector or other equipment, that they would need to pay the fee to have that technician show them how to use it, an hour or two or whatever, and that they would, get trained on how to use it for their session.
Well, we
And
have
then-
that already, that's actually
So
not the
is
issue.
that,
That's not the
that doesn't-
issue,
well,
that's a larger issue.
yeah, because you have to have a technician.
Because we don't have a technician fee, the technician is separate, so somebody will pay the technician.
So no matter what, we need a technician on site.
Yeah.
it depends.
I don't know.
Except for your issue of acquisitions. and
Yeah, that's I
sorting
think
out
a different thing,
stuff.
but
So again, in the interest of time, because we are running late now, is if this is something we take off to another little group or something like that, and report back, I think that may be a good idea.
Kim,
Because I think we can continue this conversation for hours.
does Presentation House have a policy on equipment?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I can dig it up, but it actually just refers back to our technical director, who's the one who makes the decisions, right? Which is what I'm looking at, it's the decisions. It's hard to make those decisions by committee. We can develop a policy by committee, but you're gonna figure out who's the one who's doing the day-to-day stuff of looking at going, yes, no, this is a good thing, this is the next thing to get, this is your priority, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so there's two discussions. One is around the policy part, which I think we can handle quite easily. The more complicated discussion is the implementation. Who's actually implementing the policy? Anyway, I'm happy to participate in a meeting to discuss it further.
So what we have that as, Kim, Jillian.
Yeah, it's just conceptual, not actually about equipment, but.
Well,
I think it's more about,
yeah, more about guidance on like how we decide on what we take as a donation, then also like what happens when that donation is made, like who owns it?
Yeah.
All the things down the line, right? Somebody can give you a bouquet of flowers, but it's your job to keep it alive, right? So that's.
Yeah. So it is in the policy area first, right?
Yeah.
Figuring out the implementation of it.
So again, if you guys can figure out a time that works, then we'll,
Does it just need to be the three of us?
Anybody else?
I'd like to be honest, it's like. It's just.
well, I'm wondering if maybe somebody on the hearth because of things like the piano.
And actually, Jamie, I think your expertise being part of the art committee with the health center, but you said you're part of, I don't remember what you called, what it was called. I think there's some really relevant pieces to that potentially with this, because we're not just talking about cables and microphones, we're talking about, there's been offers of all kinds of things, and we're just not in a position. Refrigerators,
Yeah,
art, ping pong tables, sculpture, like, it just goes on and on.
These are, they donate way too much stuff.
So, yeah, so I think, we certainly listened when you were saying, like, be careful, so I think if there's expertise that we can use from that experience that you've had there in developing this, that would be helpful.
I only have experience in art, I don't have experience with technical equipment.
No, that's okay,
No,
it's
this
just
is
a
about
policy.
policy.
How do you say no?
Yeah. Yeah, what are our parameters for saying yes or no, and what's the long-term commitment? What is, if we accept something, are we committing to replacing that? There's all sorts of things in there like that.
Is there a policy? Is it the health center?
Yeah, is it a policy there, do you know, or is it just?
You can share.
Okay.
I think that there probably is something that we follow.
Okay, are we okay to move on to 5.1, everybody?
Yeah.
Thank you. Gail?
Yeah, so I'm so sorry. I thought I sent this to everyone on the CCJMC website, email distribution list when I sent it out this morning. Did it only make it to you, Steph?
No,
No, we all
Oh, it
got
did make it to everyone.
It didn't make it to step.
In fact, I
Okay. Okay, I got that one wrong. Backwards. Okay, well, anyway, it was ready to go, earlier in the week so that people would have had time with it, but I needed to go through my CAC meeting yesterday, and I'm glad I did wait because we did make some significant changes yesterday, so it was a good decision. But I met with, the job description that we've been developing for this new production and programming coordinator is, it's based on this list, right? So we're using what already existed. Yes, thank you. And basically under the green under it. And, so we started by taking all of those line items and moving them in and trying to kind of like, based on our experience so far with our live arts coordinator, what's working. And so I kind of reorganized it a little bit, but the premise that Kristen and Jillian wanted me to come and talk about today were the guiding principles as opposed to the details of the job. So the guiding principles at the bottom and on the backside. So currently 100% of theater rental fees are allocated directly to the municipality. So basically, the more business we generate, the more activity we generate, which is so exciting already. We're like, 70% on weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. It's going to just snowball. It's huge. I'm fielding so many emails and phone calls a week. Jamie's directing most of them to me or Sherry, but we're getting so many. So there's so much interest, both locally and in the region. And there's really no way that this new 25-hour-a-week job is going to be able to kind of manage that kind of flow and provide a structure for each of their production needs. So, and the problem with the way that it's set up right now is the only organization that receives revenue from the increasing activity right now is the municipality, which is great. We need a source for the production and programming coordinator, and that's what this whole guiding principle is about, is when the Hearth does a show, we apply for grants, we are in the position of generating revenue to help fund this position, not only for the current year and its responsibilities, but for future years. So that seed funding for 2 years ends up with a good pool of money ready for year 3 to begin becoming independent of that 35,000. In addition, 25 hours a week is an insufficient number of hours for the job. So in the current year, generating revenue from the activities is going to help us move towards from a half-time job to a 3/4-time job, maybe to a full-time job. And that would be an ideal situation because more staffing keeps coming up as the issue, right? Staffing. Maybe would contribute to the technical director rather than right away amplifying the size of the production and programming coordinator. We'll see. We see what we need. So I guess what I wanted to do today was basically explain to folks and get some feedback on the idea that when an arts group uses the interface of the Hearth, so they go to Sienna and say, we'd like to book a space in the theater. And she says, great, that space is available. And they say, how do we get support for front of house, for concession, for setting up technical directors, our ticketing system, like the list is on here. How do we get support for that? And the answer is, you can approach the Hearth to see if they would like to co-present your show. And a co-presentation is really the beast that we are discussing here. we say, oh yeah, we believe in your show, we think it's going to suit our community well, it doesn't compete with, it's not 5 seconds before another show of the exact same type of genre. And so we think it fits well in the calendar, we would like to accept it. And our relationship, what we're agreeing to is a certain number of fixed costs will be deducted from the ticket revenue. And then after those are deducted, there is a split of those ticket sale revenues. A portion goes to the artist, community group, and a portion goes to the Hearth to continue to support and grow and make independent of municipal funding this PMP coordinator. Okay? The exact terms of that co-presentation is something that we are very actively working on. I have a draft. I'm sorry, I'm very tired, so sorry that I'm having a hard time coming up with everything. But we have a draft that we're refining. We are pretty close to a baseline. Now, that is a way that a person could get the interface of the Hearth support. There is another way that a group or an individual, an artist, can get the support, and that might be what we'll call a self-presented show. A self-presented show. And what that would look like is a group that is already ready to do their own thing. Or we don't believe in the show, like we're frightened of it because it's a R&B blues show right next to another R&B blues show. And we say, oh, could you think about shifting your date? No, this is the only time we're here. Well, we can't say, no, you can't book. Well, maybe we can, that's a discussion. But we might be able to say, we won't accept that show under our our co-present series. But they book with Sienna and they take care of everything themselves from not promotions, but most everything. What we provide for that group is still the intake. And you shouldn't have to be doing this intake, but we don't have this position set up yet. And once we do, starting maybe August, July, depending on how quickly this can happen, that person should be doing that intake process where they get your date in with you, and you give them your permit with, taking a deposit. But then we have, our PMP coordinator has a meeting, not necessarily a meeting, and even an email exchange, and says, here's our intake form. Please fill out your intake form. But also on the intake form, there's a lot of information. And we'd like you to check box and make sure you've read it. And so information could be things like, there was no technical director in this, but there are these house technicians who have been approved. Here's their name and contact information. It's part of the intake form. There's so many things on the intake form that I'm not going to list them right now, but just to give you an idea, that we could do for any art presentation that's going to happen in the theater with a public audience. Okay, that PMP coordinator can do that much. But what happens if we also made a fee for service structure where we can offer not a full co-presentation, but let's say in this particular show, Fraser, you mentioned that Tony wanted to set up a ticketing system but ran out of time. But let's say we had a ticketing system and you did the whole show yourself, because Tony is super capable of doing their own self-present. They don't need us. But they say, can we pay you the fee for service? Maybe it's $75, whatever it is, to run through your ticketing system. And we say, yes. Yeah. So you're still a self-present, but there's a fee for service item. And we would give you that intake form. I mean, you'd probably know everything anyway because you're both on the JMC, but let's say that it's an evolving document that gets more and more refined. So that's something that we can offer to a self-present. And that is basically what I'm trying to establish as a guiding principle here, is that the JMC agrees and understands that for this position to meet its objectives in the current year and become a growing and evolving and developing position, we need to charge money to derive revenue to make this a viable option for this theater.
Wow, very nice, Dale. Well put together.
Thanks.
My initial reaction is that I think it's a really good model. Especially like I understand the co-presenting model and the self-presenting model. I would consider proposing that maybe we go even a little bit further. I know that as you know, in the hotel business, when you have a venue and you're renting it out, they have preferred clients, that they have people who offer those services to them, and they're the ones, in some cases, you have to use them. It's not an option. And I think for some things, it would be good for the Hearth to have that position, particularly around things like technicians and technical equipment, that it's not an option that you contact one of these people. You have to book the technician if you're needing a technician in the space through the Hearth, and that there is a fee for that. And that's a good way of protecting the space and protecting the area of it, so you don't want too many people coming in and doing it. It doesn't affect the groups like Toki, who actually already have that relationship with it. It's actually commercial new people coming in and the processing of them. And I do agree with you in terms of going through that checklist. So that would be a good position for the Hearth to have, because it identifies a certain user group that's coming in to do a performance, do one of those things, and they do need to go through that checklist. So that would be a policy. I don't know how that works out, but it would be, I feel that Lee, you might know the term better than I do, of when you have like a hotel that's got a ballroom that they're renting out and they want to add in AV and they want to add in these things. What's the term that they use? Because they're separately contracted, but you pretty much have to go with that person. Yeah, anyway, but that was the idea. The idea is that it's not an option, and that could be a thing that's revenue generating, right? Because it's under the self-presenting model. So it's like someone's coming in there and what they're, because the Hearth is offering that service, right, for the municipality to do it, then there is a fee associated with that.
I would like to just point out that the name is the Production and Programming Coordinator, and I really don't think that we should call it the Production, Programming and Technical Coordinator.
Right.
I would like to encourage that to not happen, because what I would like to see added as soon as we can grow the position is the Production, Programming and Development Coordinator.
Right.
But because we have taken a look at this and gone, no one is going to apply for this job if it's programming, production and development, you're overseeing development. Last night's meeting disabused us of this idea, and we've decided to take the development piece, move it out of the portfolio of the PMP coordinator and have it be under the PAC for one more year and the ED. And then, but with the understanding that the coordinator can support the activities of the PAC where called upon on these different development areas, meaning to follow through on certain administrative aspects, but not to oversee it. So I would really prefer that we not get further expanded.
Well, I didn't think the person was being the technician or doing it, but it would be somehow that when someone was being approached, my concern is that
do you mind if we don't go too far in the weeds on the technical piece? So just because there's such a critical discussion that I'd like to have, it's about whether everyone on the JMC sees the validity of there being a revenue stream from the activities that the PNP coordinator oversees on certain things, maybe not on everything. I don't think the intake form should be a fee. I think that is the thing that we are delivering through our 10K from our endowment fund.
Right.
That is just like, we are offering that across the board.
Right.
We know we're going to be receiving a lot of emails, and that person's going to be redirecting emails towards Sienna, and because we're getting emails all the time. We hear we book through you, and we say, no, you actually don't book through us. You booked through Sienna, but if we decide to co-present, it would be great that you've already booked your times with her and secured your dates so that negotiations could then go forward, but you haven't lost the date in the process of waiting.
Right.
And I mean, Fraser's experience that Sienna just referred to, that those hours in the theater are detailed, right? Like how many hours before you wanted and you needed lighting, da, da, da. So we don't want to be that interface until the group has kind of done a general draft of their booking with Sienna. I think and then we can look at it and review it with them, with PMP coordinator, and go, hey, you might want to think about adding one more hour, or wow, you've got a lot of hours here. You might be, so that would be a discussion, but they booked with Sienna.
Right.
Anyway, so thank you. I'd really love to be able to stay in this conversation about revenue streams and this principle of a zero gain. I think I called it a zero gain scenario, not that I really know what that means. But I think what it would mean is that we receive nothing as the dilution effect of this person's time gets further and further diluted into, not 5 productions, not 10 productions, but 50 productions.
Right.
How does the person manage that and succeed and do a good job for anyone?
Is this something we could do a little vote on then, if you wanted to get the base principles and just?
Oh, I'd love to hear just a couple of comments and then,
I mean, eventually.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great idea, Steph. Thank you.
But I am having a hard time finding the word we're gonna vote on, so the phrase, so.
Well, I think just in principle, the proposal, in principle, which would be essentially the guiding principles, and I would make a vote on that.
Sorry, excited discussion.
Comments?
I'm in support of this. I think it's great. I think building financial sustainability for the position is critical. I think this creates an opportunity to provide those extra services for people that are things that we can't provide and maybe they want, and it helps enhance the performance and the experience for the user. So I mean, it's obvious how much thought has gone into developing this, and I think it's a good strategy to try and work with. I think I can see the interface between the coordinator and Sienna working really well, and the two of them being able to revise things if it's not fully working, right? And it's a pretty dynamic situation that.
I don't have a vote because I'm not technically part of the committee, but I think it's fabulous. I would love to see it. I think it really shows the need for the booking coordinator position with BIM to be approved and funded as well, in like coalition with that, which I know isn't this committee or anything. But just with the volume that will come in and the volume that you guys are going to be able to accept with this position will drastically increase the amount of rentals coming through me as well. So I think like it just really shows the need to have the booking coordinator job and the backfill for the rec department approved and make it happen, so that, this big influx of things coming from the hearth is actually manageable through the booking coordinator job with them.
I think as well, I think it's a great idea, I think it also makes it transparent in terms of the money, because we all know that certain activities are meant and need to be revenue generating, and certain activities are break even, and certain activities are subsidized, right? And the hearth represents the model of subsidized because it's able to get funding for certain cultural activities are subsidized. But with that, there needs to be the ability to generate revenue, right? And that's what this is clearly laid out in this model, is it has a kind of a transparency beyond the municipality, right? So if I'm looking at the outside, I can look at this and go, the heart of the not-for-profit organization is offering services, some of which can be expensive, but they're made to generate revenue. And all that revenue that's generated is going into subsidized art in the community. It's a clearer line, right?
Could I rephrase that just a
Yeah.
sec? I think that that revenue that we're generating is actually, is filtering back into the PMP coordinator position.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
but
just to be
that's-
clear.
Yeah, no, but
Thank
it
you.
is,
Yeah.
that position is needed to help, make it accessible for the arts groups, right?
But it is also the hearth will be taking risk.
Yes, absolutely.
There's always that factor that there's always a risk.
Exactly.
And it's,
And I just,
we fill the calendar full.
Yeah.
And we can't sustain those ticket sales.
Yeah.
Then something's gonna be hurt, something's gotta give.
and that's where I like is just gonna go back to the transparency model. Is it really, with that risk and that vulnerability, it makes it really clear about what that risk is with the space. So it isn't getting buried in the Bowen Island municipality larger picture, where people are confused a bit about, why is the municipality putting in more money, or who's subsidizing what? It's just kind of a clearer, it's easier to follow, right? It's a simple idea. That's why it's.
So a couple of things, maybe playing a little bit of devil's advocate, but bear with me. Sienna, your comment earlier about people finding loopholes for the lower rate. Is there a worry that this could be one of those avenues for it? Like if it's,
Yeah.
if it automatically then becomes co-productions with you and things like that.
It self-presents though, they're a fee for service, so they're making a decision about who's co-presenting.
Yeah.
So there's no backdoor.
Yeah,
or
do you
loophole.
mind if I just answer, Fraser? It's a great question, Fraser, and it's, that one I don't actually think of as a loophole, I actually think of it as the exact right procedure. So like an artist from the city comes in and says, Daniel Lapp wants to perform here. Now, he could book it at a non-locals rate, but he wants to present under our co-presentation. So we actually get the locals, we get a local organization's rate. And then if we do a good job with Daniel, he makes money, we make money, and the theater makes money because of the rental. But if we can't help him, the probability is he can't do the show. And the reason is most out-of-town artists, if they don't have someone to host them, they don't know how to reach their audience. So then they say, thanks, but I think I'll move over to Gabriel or something like that. So I do think you're right. I don't see it actually as a loophole. I see it as like that attracts more talent here, if that helps as an answer. And then for local artists, I always thought that local artists would get the same rate, to be honest. So this doesn't apply, but I mean, I don't see it as a loophole that a local artist wants to put together an ad hoc group and put on a show. But like, if it helps formalize their presentation under the hearth, if we accept it, then if we say yes to them being in our co-presentation series, then again, I don't see that one as a loophole. I see it as a really valid and strong kind of way of creating an envelope around a show by an artist that maybe doesn't have as much experience or doesn't have as much, infrastructure around them like Tody does, because you guys been around for a long time. So that's another version that I'm imagining. And then a third version that I guess I could imagine is, no, I lost it, but those are two examples that I hope are not considered so much loopholes, but like a nice way of creating a container.
Okay, so this may lead into my second point,
Yeah.
which is becoming competition between the Hearth and independent or, self-presented groups and things. So knowing that the Hearth does have a priority in bookings and things like that, you'd have a financial incentive to take those co-pros and not the self-presented ones that perhaps don't need the support that you're going. So how could a group like Tody, who is self-presented, feel like, okay, well, at the end of the day, we're not in competition for what is ultimately pretty limited space?
Well, I can answer that in terms of.
But do you mind?
So this
Tim?
is
Yeah.
to the heart.
No, it's really helpful. Okay, so do you mind just reviewing one aspect of your question?
Sure.
Because I missed one piece of it. So what is the incentive that the Hearth gets to book before, let's say, is that what you were saying?
Correct.
Okay, cool, great. So it's a really interesting thought around this, that for the Hearth Presents series, so these are the shows that we're booking sort of a year or two out, right? Those are ones that I think we could say, like, it's of equal, like Tody's booking dates, we worked with you on your dates, for instance, for this year, we have it in a calendar, blah, blah, blah. So those ones are kind of planned out ahead of time. And I think most of the co-presents are going to be ones that are happening more within the year leading up to their presentation. So there'll be opportunities that are coming to us. Rather than us going out seeking them for future planning, people are saying, hey, I'm on tour. Could we get into the theater? So your dates have already been firmly established. Also, I think a reason for this rationale of that artist should have to go and book with, set their dates first with Sienna is because I don't want to be pre-booking dates that would compete with your show. Like that's not in my interest. And in fact, I was just offered a show by Ballet BC that is the night before your guys' rough crossing. So October 23rd. First thing I would do is go to you and say, do you see that as a conflict?
I think we've got a schedule for that date, for example.
You don't.
So our stuff-
Right now, it's not in the calendar of dates you gave us. But we could just go to you and say, do you like this show being here, not like the show being here? So we don't have an incentive to take on every show. To be very honest, I think we have to max our shows at maybe 3 or 4 per month, max that we can this PMP coordinator can manage. So I think, I don't see it being a problem, but I think it's a valid question, and I do think we
And I
can
am
work our
playing
way
devil's
through
advocate a
it.
bit here on this.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can Tony as an example, but there could be others as well too, so yeah.
But because of these are shorter term rentals, I think that Hearth's privileged position in terms of being able to book 3 months before you is not going to end up being a conflict. Because within 21 months, is that what it is? We have the exact same schedule of opportunity.
And so, may I just add something to it, Fraser, which is about generating revenue. And people who come in late and are not connected to the community or want to do something need to pay top dollar. And we need to protect the Hearth and the local groups who are subsidized to make sure that they're able to generate revenue from the space. So this is this thing about competition, right? We've experienced this predatory behavior by commercially oriented groups who come in and book the space and rent it from us and knocked us out, right? Knocked our own programming out. And so those barriers are meant to be relatively high to keep those people so they can come in. You're more than welcome to come in and put that event on in the space, but you should be paying top dollar for it because it can inadvertently impact local programming. And they don't participate in looking at the schedule, right? They just want their date. They don't pay attention to what's going on around. That's why it's good what Gail's proposal is, that it does pass through the eye of somebody who's got an overview of what the cultural events that are happening throughout the programming year. And I think that is more appropriate for the Hearth to look at, and let's say to Sienna to be worrying about that every time someone calls, that she is the one who has to look at what it's connected to in terms of the cultural programming that goes on within BOA. It's called curation, right? And curation is a really important part of the success of a cultural space. Without curation, they die. They just die because there's no control over what goes on there.
Did you have something that you wanted to say?
No.
As I scribbled some notes.
It's for me to do tomorrow.
There you go.
So under the guiding principles, one of the things I wrote is the PNP coordinator must be able to say no to events that conflict with existing bookings or are too risky or jeopardize the ability of the PNP coordinator to fulfill other functions, such as, I wrote here, fundraising and proper productions. Leave out the fundraising for a minute because that might have been moved down into development. It might be moved out of the portfolio, but proper production support to artists and organizations already committed to. Okay, so that's a guiding principle that I would like in that vote. You know, like let's say we're voting, Steph. It's not just on the premise of revenue production, but also on the ability to say no. But I would like to entertain this question of, can we recommend on a curatorial basis that to the booking coordinator, Sienna, to say no even to a self-present?
I was just gonna ask you.
Yes, exactly. So we have a theater group that asked us about a show that was minutes around yours, around Bard on the Rock. And I think the answer should be that they can't book it. But I cannot say that. We could say Hearth won't accept it as a co-present because we don't want to be implicated in a direct competition to a show. But could we even go so far in that the conversation about curatorial that Kim has just made to recommend to the municipality that they not accept the booking because it's an impact to the successful functioning of a regular user. We don't want to slight our regular users. We want our users to be coming back year after year, not for a one-off event, end up with a conflict that makes them not successful. So that is beyond the scope of what I've written here, but I do think it's worthy of conversation with the larger curatorial.
Well, at the end of the day, we were always talking way back when about meeting multiple times a year to briefly go over that schedule. Members of REC and the Hearth and and the space as well too. And I think that's something we need to make sure we do.
That's potentially a loss of rent, though.
I know.
That's what I was gonna say, I'm not sure that would be agreed upon broadly.
But you can make it that the commercial level is high, that's where the subsidized levels would is tied into that conversation of policy. We don't say no to anyone, but when someone comes in is going to be very disruptive, we make sure they pay premium rates for that disruption, right?
And
that could-
and the other shows take a risk.
You would be surprised that.
What if somebody books right up against one of the Toady shows?
And in this case, with Bard, it was another Shakespeare show.
Right, so then what happens?
No, it's not a Shakespeare show.
No, but just an example.
The Shakespeare ones I asked you guys about was in
Very-
January.
Maybe if we're talking about scenarios, this is the way I would see it happening, is that if there's a preferred services given to the Hearth for those extra kind of add-ons, that someone coming off island would be paying a commercial rate to be able to get the space, would be forced to go and deal with the Hearth about getting the kind of add-on services which have to do with ticketing, like reserved seats, communicating to the island, like all the stuff that's required. And if the Hearth said, no, we're not gonna provide those services, then that person would either have to figure out how to do all those services by themselves on the island. But they're getting the signal to perhaps not do it. In some cases, people will book anyway because they're gonna bring all their people they wanna see it over by themselves.
Okay.
You get this. So you still get the revenue without it being as disruptive, right?
So the guiding principle might say the P&P coordinator must be able to say no to events that conflict or don't jeopardize or whatever for self-present and the addition of fee for services. And if people like Kim's idea, and then that would be in the guiding principle, it wouldn't just be a co-present. And that way we're shielding the users that are already booked in there from competition that we see to be like deleterious to sales for the groups that are in there. But now Jillian is saying, that's why I didn't include this, the no booking for like something that was a self-present, because are we in a position to make that decision? Are we the curator of the Bowen Theatre? Not really.
Not really,
No.
but what you can do is people can still rent it and put their thing on in there, right? Because there is no curation from the municipal level, there's just policy, right? Which is good. But you have to shift, you have to tweak it in a way that if I'm coming in and renting it, I'm well aware of the challenges that I'm going to be facing. This is, you don't want to fool people into thinking there was a Shakespeare show on there that did really well. I'm gonna bring my Shakespeare show, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna rent the theater and do it there, and it's gonna be just as successful. They need to be made aware of the kind of support and network in the community that the other work had. And that's appropriate for the Hearth to have that conversation with that person who's renting it, right? Because they're aware of the activities, cultural activities, and use of the space in a broader way over the season and what is going on in the community. So it's both ways, because you don't want to be in the business of renting it out to people on one-offs where you take all their money and they have a fiasco. They have a fiasco because no one shows up. they have their own fiascos, and it's great that you get their money, but they, they never come back. And it doesn't
Thank you.
help the reputation of the space.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
So-
Thanks for coming.
With Sienna's exit in mind, thank you, Kim.
Yeah.
We are running very late. We should be wrapped by now. We obviously haven't met. This is important for us to get through, but for the purpose of Gail, what you're looking from us today, are we even in a situation where we could do a vote or something? How are we feeling about that?
I could make a quick motion that it would just be to accept this guiding principles part of the document for further
I
discussion.
think we need more discussion.
Yeah, I was going to say, Councillor Getty, would seem like you.
I've had my hand up a couple of times, it's been
Sorry.
so lots of chatter.
I
Good
think we need
discussion.
time too.
If 100% of the rentals are allocated to the municipality, and that's the main source of income, then, and we've got Sienna's report that there's, we've generated $7,000 to date in terms of rentals. I'm not sure how we keep track of what the increase is. And at the end of the day, I think council's talking about 2 years seed money. So at the end of the day, how do we set it up so that it is self-sustaining? Right? So if all of the money is basically rentals, there may be a little bit for tickets, there may be a little bit for concession, there may be a little bit for front of house and other services, tech director and some of these other things. But I don't see here what the plan is in terms of how does it become self-sustaining. So if it's not going to be subsidized by council, I think we have to either figure out how to document it so that without it, it's X amount of money, and with it, it's going to generate so much more, right? And that's going to be income that might justify, if we can get council to realize that that position helps to generate so much more money for that resource, that asset, right? Then it makes it so that it's not necessarily a 2-year thing, right? Because I don't see how this model supports the position after the 2 years. Right? So somehow or other, we have to figure out both the municipality is going to be interested in making sure that the $35,000 that's paid out isn't just, something that is just, the community would slaughter us if they thought it was just being given to the Hearts without some sort of really detailed reporting back. So, we're sort of going out on a limb in terms of putting a whole lot of money into arts and generating as much as we can from the theater. We have to be able to justify it. We have to have a lot of reporting. But at the end of the day, is this always going to, I don't know how we separate out the rent that comes for the place and the management and the ongoing upkeep and maintenance of the place and all the equipment, which is what the rent is supposed to, and it's heavily subsidized already. So how do we value add so that it becomes viable for the Hearts to be able to have this position and, generate all of the other, use it as the leverage to generate all the other, that's the important principle. This is a position that goes to the Hearts because you can then use it to generate grants, right? It makes you more eligible.
Right.
So
That's the key, actually, right there that's not addressed in here is the ability to seek funding.
It is
for
addressed.
that.
It's noted in there.
Yeah.
that's part of
it's
it.
the-
But
it's
then that was whether or not that gets second to a later add-on in terms of development, right? And I think you have to rethink that.
Say that again, no,
So the whole thing in terms of grant writing and fundraising and all the rest of it, there was one little comment that you made in terms of whether or not that's a later add-on. And it becomes programming, production and development, right? So I think that the development might be if there's some way of creating more of the Hearth Presents so that there's income that can pay for the position or other grants and stuff like that. And then if there's more Hearth Presents activity, then if there's greater likelihood of there being competition over time, right? So Tony comes to the Hearth and we pay our membership and we get the insurance and we, you know, I mean, it was fantastic in terms of you guys stepping up and helping with the concession. In terms of the audience wanted it, loved it, and it's like, great, you guys, you know, whatever money you make on it, it's yours, you know, whoever does that. Whether it's the Hearth or whether it's some other group that you get to do it. If we don't have to worry about that, if you take on tickets, I'd much rather pay you than Eventbrite, right? And I could get my money faster.
I should probably get a little bit.
Maybe. Anyway, but I paid the higher price, right? That was, I don't mind changing the price of the percentage. And if it goes, you know, whatever. But it seems to me that that's the calculation that I need to see to be able to convince the council that this is going to become self-sustaining. Right?
Yeah.
Or get your head around the fact that it might not become self-sustaining, but it's going to be so valuable. Right? If the only income is primarily rents, and this maximizes the rents of that space, that's worth it. I don't know.
Thank you. Those are some really useful comments and observations. One thought I want to share is that my understanding is that council did shift the terms of this from a community. I met with Kristen, that it went from being a community grant to a different kind of agreement where we have a 1 year of funding guarantee with an option to renew for a second year based on reporting. And so I guess.
It all comes under the budget item is community grants, but yes.
Okay, sorry. I don't know, that was my only, how I understood what Kristen and Jillian were sharing. So already we're in a position where with 1 year of operations, we have to demonstrate the effectiveness of this position to receive the second year. And so I guess one of the things I would hope is that we could get the guiding principles approved by the JMC, and you guys will give us the opportunity to develop this position in a meaningful way. And I also wanted to address the other thing that you said, and it's absolutely true. I'm actually with you on this, Judy, that I would like to have seen the development piece prioritized over the production and programming, but we can't do it. There's no way, the PAC has just convinced me of that. So their rationale is that the development piece can still be overseen. I basically engineer, mastermind all the grant writing, and I will continue to do that next year because we can't fulfill on 25 hours the production, programming, and development. So that will be my deal. You know, we've already agreed that our ED will take on the seeking corporate sponsorships. It doesn't mean we can't ask our P&P coordinator to do some of the administrative work for that portfolio.
I think all of that understanding and development and the talking that you're doing has to be spelled out.
Yeah, this is what I'm doing, right? I am spelling it out. I'm in a process.
You know, what you're just saying now is that, you know, support of the activities of PAC. Okay.
Yeah. This is my best effort, and if it's not good enough, I understand.
No,
And we could move this out of the heart, but this is the best I can do.
Yep.
Yeah, and we can do.
It's the best that we can do.
We have been working tirelessly to make a very strong proposal, and I hope that the guiding principles, we're actually just looking for the support that asking the community to pay revenue through either fee for services or co-presentation model is an agreed upon guiding principle so that we can continue to evolve this job description.
Yeah.
Is that within the purview of the JMC for us to decide how you as the Hearth vote does that sort of stuff?
Well, the JMC has to approve the job description before it can go out for tender. And so because of that, it would be silly for us to bring you a job description if you had a fundamental disagreement with this idea that a revenue production, it would be implicit in how we design the job.
And it is totally under our purview because it's about how the space is being managed, right? Which is the mandate of this committee, is the ongoing management of the facility, including that.
And Fraser, we only learned that a week and a half ago in the meeting, that we did need to have the GMC actually review the job description, get its approval before we could put it out for tender. So we can't move forward with having this.
That was the piece I wanted to know.
Yeah, thank you.
So, long way of saying, do we want to, at this point, just at a committee level, I'm happy to like propose just a motion to accept in principle this, so that you can go forward, because you've had that discussion. There's obviously more that needs to go down, but is it a useful thing to just approve this in principle? Saying the yes to go forward with it because we agree with the fundamental principles behind it. I'm asking, what do you think?
So I didn't receive this, I guess I didn't read my emails. I was working on something other stuff with trust, so I didn't get this until this meeting. And we're having an AGM with Toby, coming up very soon, 2 weeks, I think.
Yes, 23rd.
So I'd certainly like to be discussing this and thinking about it and going back to my group in terms of figuring out what Toby thinks about this. And I wouldn't mind talking to Kirsten and, possibly just bouncing ideas off these two in terms of, any little, and you, in terms of any ideas that come up. So,
To table it for
Yeah.
next month?
yeah, and I think try to figure out, council doesn't meet during August. And you want to put out a job description and get somebody hired over probably that same period of time. So I think we need to figure out.
I think we'd like to get it out well,
Yeah.
now if we could, but obviously we can't because
Beautiful.
the existing,
As possible.
the existing position ends at the end of June, so then there's nobody. There's no hired person, so then it falls all on staff and volunteers. And even the process of posting and
Yep.
interviewing and hiring, that all is volunteer time. So I'm just saying that there's a push. We want to be ready for September.
And I'm happy for it to go forward. I'm taking July and August off for mental health reasons. And so if it doesn't get done before July 1st, it won't include me, which is fine. We can move forward under it. It might-
Okay, so I think the next move is to try and get a noodle bowl for as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Or even before a doodle poll, I'll throw out 2 dates, and if it fails, we'll do a doodle. Is that okay?
Sure.
How about Monday, June 16th?
Underneath the whole.
So our meeting is the 23rd.
I stopped caring about exhaustion of counselors, I'm just kidding.
No, it actually happens to be the hard presenting.
Yeah, the hardest-
I'm traveling over to Vancouver Island for First Nations.
Tuesday the 17th? Oh,
I'm in council meetings in,
okay,
so that's trust council.
how about what day is it today? Thursday.
Okay.
No, but it's a Thursday, right? I'm just trying to get what day of the week is good for you guys. So maybe 12? So that's terrible. We've got a lot, I'll be the acting CEO and Crystal will be the acting CEO that week.
Is June 9th an option? We jumped over that one.
Yeah, that's council.
Next Monday?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Council, yeah.
Those are the dates you just.
Okay, so I guess you feel you're going in a different direction, like Tuesday the 24th, Wednesday 25th, Thursday the 26th.
24th, I think.
We're not gonna have a hire.
Okay, well,
Did we try and find some other?
okay, I'll go back and I'll go.
16th to
Sorry. So you're in
Trust council.
the whole week, 16 to the 20th? Okay, so why don't we go back to the 9th, and what about the Wednesday the 11th?
24th is the day after our AGM. It's the battle blessing in the morning.
Might be a bit of a tricky one for me if we did it at the 4:45 start, but
How about the Wednesday the 25th, did we say that?
It's getting
I know.
It's getting late for us.
So she wants it after the Tony AGM, which is on the 23rd.
Okay then. You might not hire someone to listen.
Not enough time.
Yeah, there isn't enough. I'm sorry.
It waits till September, inquiries are just on pause.
Yeah, inquiries will not be met.
Yeah, we won't, then we won't be prepared for September.
Is there a way you can talk to Tony in advance of the UGM?
So why don't we see if we can get everybody.
I think it goes into the fall.
Next week.
Next week, the 11th? Wednesday, the 11th? On holidays, but.
But I'm here and we can discuss the position.
Wednesday, the 11th, go pencil in.
What time are we thinking?
How would you like? Well, you were the 4:45, but you for no, next Monday.
Yeah, 4:45 won't work for me for Wednesday, but.
What about the Friday the 13th? Is that, or probably people don't like meetings on Fridays.
What about Thursday?
Okay, yeah.
Thursday's good.
The 12th?
Thursday the 12th works for me.
4:45? Yep. Okay, I'm gonna send this now, and then it'll be adjusted later with the other information, but I just want to make sure this happens. Should I put the room? Hold on.
So we may not, for example, have the revision stuff done for the policies, but not by then, but this is more important. Let's book it. Okay.
That'll work timing-wise.
So then you and I, Cody,
Just send an email.
before the 12th.
Is there something that I can deliver to make it more useful for you? In terms of, I mean, I'll revise this with
I
that.
might have some questions. Right.
Can we wrap 5.1 up and do the last little bits before we can get all out of here? Gail, you feeling okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, new business, 6.1. Okay, action items, review.
Okay, just to make sure you guys are good through, but sometimes we'll. Yeah, I don't remember saying I do that, so I just want to do a little review before we finish. About rental policy revisions, subcommittee meeting, you guys have a date, we used to have the date, if not the work, Lisa, Anna, Fraser, and Mimi. The next one is the donation policy development, which is Lee, Kim, and Jillian.
Rely on you to call me and your busy schedule.
Okay.
Pleasure.
Okay, and then, Jamie, would you be able to find out if there is a donation policy at the health center, and if so, share it with us? Yes? Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Information items.
Where's the public art committee?
I will send that out, that'll put that on my list. Yeah. Oh, information items just there for your reference.
Question period, anybody? No. All right, well, we know our next meeting, I'd like to call it adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
This really makes.
Yeah.
It's so much better.